Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wolfpacker Show. My name's Ethan McDowell. I am here with Noah Fleischman. We're coming to you the morning after NC State's 59-35 loss to Clemson Saturday. The Wolfpack is now 2-2 on the season. It was the second, disappointing blowout loss where the Wolfpack was never really competitive in this game. Second big time setback for the Pack. NC State went into the season with two early chances to make statements against big time opponents away from Carter Finley Stadium, and they fell short in both of those games by a wide margin. There's a couple positives to touch on in this game, and we'll talk about those, but mostly it's pretty negative, and we're going to dive into the negative. We're going to dive into what is really troubling this Wolfpack team. Before we do that, I want to mention quickly, we're both reporters for the Wolfpacker.com. That is NC State's site on the On3 network, the fastest growing college football, basketball, recruiting site out there. If you are not happy with the football team right now and you want to read about some basketball or basketball recruiting, we're going to have a lot about both basketball teams over the next couple of weeks on the site as we start to dive into preseason. And the basketball team landed a big-time 4-star top 100 commit yesterday. The men's squad did. So go check out that. Noah has a story up on the Wolfpacker.com about that recruit. And we're going to spend the rest of the show talking about football, though. We're going to dive into NC State's loss to the Tigers in Death Valley. And, there's plenty of writing up on the Wolfpacker.com if you want to read more about it, too. We already have a report card up. We'll have plenty of PFF grade and snap count analysis, Sunday superlatives, all the stuff that we usually do, breaking down NC State's second loss of the season. But for now, Noah, let's talk about, just our initial thoughts on this loss. NC State, Dave Doran said it himself. They were never really in this game. From the first drive, a 75-yard, 4-play drive for Clemson that ended in a long touchdown run for Cade Klubnik, set the tone for this game. It put Clemson up 7-0, and they never really looked back. Jumped out to a 28-0 lead in the first quarter, and the game was effectively over after the first 15 minutes. Big picture, Noah, I want to get your thoughts on this loss. After you've had a chance to sleep on it, how are you feeling about this 24-point setback for the Pack?
Yeah, I think it's the same as what we were talking about 2 weeks ago when they lost to Tennessee in similar fashion. NC State was billed, it believed in itself the whole preseason. We talked to basically every coach on staff, support staff. Everyone we were talking to was really, really optimistic about this year. Thinking it was the best team that they've had in a while, most deep. And so far in the two games where NC State needed to show up and play, it really hasn't. And this one was one where, it got away from them quick. Tennessee, they were in the game for the first half and it slipped away. This one slipped away. First drive of the game. Clemson scores pretty fast. Cade Klubnik, 55-yard rushing touchdown. The Tigers blitzed them early, and that's on offense. 28-0 in the first quarter, 222 yards of total offense for the Tigers, which 145 of that was on defense. And I think overall the defense, or rushing, and I think overall the defense for NC State was non-existent in the first half, 45-7 by halftime. And this is a team that really hangs its hat on defense, and it had probably its worst showing of the Tony Gibson era.
Yeah, I feel like there's been, after the Tennessee game and now after the Clemson game, we've almost had to go back to whenever we look for the statistical comparisons for this season so far, it leads us straight to the 2019 season, a 4-8 season for the Pack, and not a pretty one. The last time they gave up 50 points was against Clemson in that 4-8 season, right? It's the last time they gave up this many points, or 40 plus points in a half, was against the Tigers. They've never given up 45 points in a half under Dave Doran. Like, this was statistically, it was the worst half of Dave Doran's tenure with the Wolfpack. I guess we can talk about the offense a little bit if you want to. I thought the big story for this game was the defense, and just, Caden Fordham said it after the game, the lack of toughness. But we'll break down what we saw on offense first, and that starts with CJ Bailey, the storyline that we discussed in depth all week, Noah. It was his first start going into Death Valley, intimidating atmosphere. Probably, it's going to be maybe the toughest atmosphere he plays in his college career. It's tough to beat Death Valley, right? And he actually had a really, really good day. He finished the day 16 for 25, 204 yards, a touchdown, and came on a short pass to Jordan Waters, and then also an interception as well. That was a poor decision into double coverage-ish on a comeback route. But he started the game 10 for 11 passing and completed 6 throws of 10 yards or more during that stretch. I thought even when the offense was struggling as a whole, he was showing consistent positive flashes. What did you think of CJ's debut in the starting lineup?
Yeah, I think it was probably the one bright spot of the game for NC State. He handled himself really, really well, was not intimidated by the atmosphere, which is hard, especially for an 18-year-old quarterback. First time playing in front of 81,000 fans on the road that are really going after you. They know that, you're making your first career start. It was loud. We heard it. And he settled in well. As you said, completed first time 11 passes, looked pretty comfortable. And I think, when you look at what CJ Bailey did, it gives a lot of optimism of what's to come for this offense, at least through the air, with his 204 passing yards and a touchdown. We'll see kind of what happens. But overall, I think it was a solid, starting debut. He built off of what he did against Louisiana Tech in that second half. And now I think this is a big learning tool for him. Not only does he know that now he belongs in college football, but I think it puts a lot of film against a really good defense. If he could throw the ball and find tight windows and get downfield. When you look at his numbers overall, you talk about the long plays. He had a 36-yard pass to Justin Jolie in the first quarter.
Yeah.
He really stretched the field a little bit. He had a 15-yard pass to Keenan Jackson. Then later in the game, had a 23-yard pass to Wesley Grimes. So this is a guy that's going down the field. He's not really settling for a lot of checkdowns, which I think is really good to see from a freshman quarterback, not really just immediately seeing the running back and going to him. Yes, he's hit, the checkdown plays when they're there and he needs to take them, but these guys not afraid to push the ball downfield and take some chances. We saw it on the pick six. Wasn't the best play, but, I'd rather him take chances in a game where they're down by a lot than just be conservative.
Yeah, that's an example. Like at that point, the game was over. NC State was pressing, and when you're pressing, mistakes like that are going to happen. So, as far as freshman mistakes go, I'd say that's on the lesser end of just like the concern meter. Not really worried about that interception in the grand scheme of things here. Overall, I thought it was a really strong day for him. The ugly part of the offense was once again, the rushing attack. The numbers, when you look at the final box score, it doesn't look that bad. They finished with 183 rushing yards in the game, but that was mostly in the second half against Clemson's backups and third string players. Even in the first quarter, they ran the ball 11 times and averaged 0.4 yards per attempt. It was not working for the Pack again. They went into halftime and they had 29 rushing yards. So rushing attack was just non-existent again, and that they were not able to, take that stress off of the passing game, take that stress off of CJ Bailey when you needed to. I didn't think the offense was like terrible. Again, like we're going to talk about the defense. I didn't think the offense was the huge problem from this game, but there wasn't much complimentary football going on. And then if you want to talk about the turnovers, the 2 first half fumbles, first by Bailey. I don't think you can really put that on him. It was defender beat Anthony Belton and he gave up a sack, and CJ never saw the defender coming. So, he gave up that, and then KC fumbled on the next drive. So that they were down 7-0, I think, at that point, and then the 2, or maybe it might have even been 14-0 at that stage of the game. But then that just continued the series of, the snowballing. It's a phrase we've used a lot. It snowballed and it continued to snowball for the Pack. And wow, the offense showed flashes. The passing game particularly showed flashes. And CJ Bailey definitely showed some encouraging signs for a freshman quarterback. I don't think I mentioned this, but I thought he just improvised well. When he got out of the pocket, he kept his eyes downfield, wasn't immediately looking to run, and found some players downfield as a result. I thought that was really solid. And he's really, I feel like, if you're listening to this and you're like, why are the hosts talking about the optimistic parts of the game and not focusing on everything that went wrong? Well, I think honestly, CJ's probably the only optimistic part of this performance. And I was hesitant to say so after just seeing him play one half against Louisiana Tech, but I think now that we've seen Grayson McCall and CJ Bailey play almost equal football, obviously we want Grayson to get healthy ASAP and hoping for a speedy recovery from him from his undisclosed injury. Hoping he's all right, but I think once they're both healthy, I think it's hard to take the ball out of CJ Bailey's hands at this point. I think he's shown that he brings a different level of spark to this offense. What do you say, Noah?
He does, and I think he talked about it a little bit after the game. CJ did. He was kind of surprised on how quickly he was able to rally the offense around himself. The offense obviously wants to play well for him. When you look at the numbers, they almost have a pretty similar sample size to pull from. Grayson McCall is 50 of 75. CJ is 29 of 45. So almost similar completion percentages of 66.7 and 64.4. But the biggest thing that's different is CJ is not afraid to go downfield. I mentioned it earlier. He's averaging 8 yards of completion. Grayson averaged 6.3 yards of completion. It's a pretty big, difference when you add it up over 100 attempts eventually once it gets to that point. So I think that's big. And CJ Bailey, he's kind of the future of this offense, and
he's definitely the future of it.
Yeah. Well, if they can hold on to him, that's a different story for a different day. But overall, this is a time that the season it's not lost. They've got 8 games left. They can still win plenty of games going down the stretch. Schedule gets a heck of a lot easier now after the first 4 weeks. They don't have any more top 10 CFP caliber teams on their schedule. These 2 losses they have probably going to be 2 college football playoff teams, which at the end of the day is not the end of the world. NC State fans who wanted to be in the playoff, it's still possible. They can still run the table in the ACC and be 7-1 and have a chance to make it in the championship game. But overall, CJ Bailey is the future of this offense for the time being, and I think it would kind of be a disservice to him and the rest of the team to take him out. When you look at what they're working with, not only is he a freshman quarterback, most of the skill position players around him are all coming back next year. They're all redshirt freshmen to redshirt juniors. They're all going to be back. This is a perfect time with an easier schedule down the stretch to learn, grow together. And if they can do that and win games going in, the last 8 weeks, this will be really, really exciting for NC State going in the offseason, building off of this year next year. Obviously, I wouldn't say the season's over by any means, but I would just say when you look at the big picture, it's really important, I guess, to get CJ Bailey some playing time because they don't know how long they're going to have him. Maybe they have him for a year. Maybe they have him for 3 years and he goes to the league. You never really know in this era of college football, and you can't really take a chance on sitting him after because if you do that and he's played well and he watches and something happens and he could just leave. And that's just the era that we're in college football. And I definitely can tell you that he will have a market in the offseason if that were to be the case.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, he is going to – I mean, he's already shown enough, I think, to prove he's going to be a very productive college quarterback. So, well, I agree. He's the future of this program, and I think the future is now for this team. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the second half of our show, I think. But for now, let's turn our attention to the defense. To be clear, I thought the defense was not set up for success at all. The starting field position was pretty brutal. They had to defend the pack at I defend the Tigers at the Wolfpack 18 and 38 on 2 first quarter drives. After those fumbles, that's not setting them up for success. But Clemson never had a drive that lasted more than 5 minutes and scored 59 points in this game. It looked easy for the Tigers. They were averaging over 13 yards per rush in the first half, I believe, and over 10 yards per play. They're scoring drives. Let me read them to you. In the first quarter, Noah, 4 plays, 75 yards. 6 plays, 91 yards. 5 plays, 18 yards. 1 play, 38 yards. The shortest drive out of that group was 7 seconds. The longest was 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Clemson traveled 91 yards in 6 plays in 1:34 of game time. Noah, it was honestly maybe probably the worst defensive performance I've seen a Tony Gibson coach defense play. And the second place candidate for that race is 2 weeks ago. So it has been a really tough year so far for the NC State defense. And today, or yesterday, I should say, it started with tackling. For the second time this season, they missed double-digit tackles. 10 missed tackles, according to PFF, the exact same number as they missed against Tennessee. They weren't wrapping up. They were trying to deliver big hits and were bouncing right off of Clemson. They were really struggling to get off blocks. When Clemson got hands on an NC State defender, they usually weren't getting off. And, the Pack couldn't cover consistently, and they were just getting dominated at the line of scrimmage for most of this game. It was a really discouraging defensive performance for the Pack, giving up 400 yards in the first half. Noah, what did you see from that side of the ball that concerned you?
Yeah, I think the tackling was a big issue. You can't play a team like this and not wrap up. There's a lot of arm tackles that were missed, and Clemson's got good enough players they can break through an arm tackle pretty easily and get downfield. They're bouncing off some guys. Run fits weren't great. We talked about Clemson was able to run the ball at extremely high level. And that drive you talked about, 6 plays, 91 yards, a minute, 34 seconds. That was Clemson's second drive of the game after NC State punted. NC State punted from the Clemson 42-yard line, which was an interesting strategy. I mean, they were playing a field position game only down by a score at the time. But 2 plays later, Clemson was at the Clemson 42-yard line.
Yeah.
And that really hurt after that. And, yeah, I think overall it's just really comes down to execution. NC State did not do that. Clemson was able to score a touchdown on 6 of its first 7 drives, including its first 4 series in a row. It had 1 punt mixed in there, a 3-and-out. NC State's defense did force 3-and-out, and NC State was able to score a touchdown off of that. So you did see some progress there. But then after that, they went touchdown, field goal, touchdown before Clemson pulled its starters, and NC State's defense forced 4 punts after that. But you can't really look at what happened in the end of the third quarter into the fourth quarter. So overall, I think the defense is a lot of tough, hard, soul searching to do. Dave Doran said after the game, Sunday is not going to be a pretty day for anybody on the team, but especially the defense.
Yeah.
They're going to watch film and see what went wrong, because we'll talk about this later in the week, but they're playing an Illinois team that beat Notre Dame like 3 weeks ago. So they don't have a lot of room for error coming up. Yes, they're not going to play a top 10 team anymore, but they'll see a team that was nationally ranked coming into this weekend. So overall, the defense just did not execute at the level it needed to, and it came down to really just tackling. You talk about 10 missed tackles. You're not going to win a game doing that. Don't care who you're playing. You can miss 10 tackles against, Western Carolina, and the Catamounts might win that game. So they got a lot of work to do, Ethan, in the next week before another game, because they've been mentioning yesterday the whole 4-3 start a year ago and winning 5 in a row straight. They used the bye week to get right. Ethan, their first bye week doesn't come until week 9. So they've got to do a lot of this fixing on the fly. A long way to go till they hit that. So we'll see how much fixing they can do in a 7-day stretch before they have Northern Illinois at noon this coming weekend.
Yeah, the mood of the Tennessee press conferences after were frustrated and I would say motivated. They were determined to take steps forward. That game was obviously just a nightmare for the Pack, but you got the sense of everyone realized, all right, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to improve. Let's go do it. All of the goals still in front of you, right? After this game against Clemson, I would say the mood was a lot more similar to the Duke game last year. Caden Fordham's post-game press conference rang very similar to Peyton Wilson's after the loss to the Blue Devils. That blowout, a similarly just non-competitive matchup where Peyton Wilson called for the team to play tougher. Caden Fordham delivered a similar message, right? After that Duke game, they had the bye week. They had a week, like you said, to soul search, to really just find themselves and turn the season around. You don't have that yet. You have 4 more games, 5 weeks until you're going to have a chance to, reset as a team. NC State needs to figure it out on the fly, and that's difficult to do. And the bottom line is, man, they don't have Peyton Wilson. They don't have the Peyton Wilson as a player. They don't have him as a leader in that locker room. There are leaders, certainly. Davin Vann still in that locker room, great leader. Grayson McCall still leading the offense, even though he's hurt. But they need the defense to really find itself, and they were just missing gaps. They were missing tackles. They just haven't been able to defend the run at all so far this year. 2 games where they've given up more than 250 rushing yards. It could have been a lot more than that. Clemson gave Phil Maffa, their standout running back, the ball 7 times Saturday. He rushed for 107 yards and a touchdown, averaging 15.3 yards per carry. Like he got pretty much whatever he wanted against the Wolfpack. And it goes back to they're just not able to keep teams off of schedule right now. They had 4 tackles for loss. It's actually a higher number than it feels like it has been in the past few weeks for the Pack, but still 1 sack, and they're just not causing much disruption in the backfield. This 3-3-5 defense, we've mentioned it a billion times. It puts linebackers in position to make plays, and it just doesn't feel like the Pack has the same erasers at those spots that it did in previous years. By erasers, I mean not just good players that are playing their roles. I don't think that, Devon Betty, Caden Fordham, or Sean Brown individually are, bad players. I think they have shown flashes and, have the capability to be productive linebackers. We've seen it in this season, but from all 3 of them in certain spots. But when you had Peyton Wilson back there, last season he was covering up for all sorts of mistakes, almost to a fault at points, right? Trying to cover up other people's errors. When you had a guy like Isaiah Moore and Drake Thomas, and all 3 of them at one point, you just had such elite play at the linebacker spot that you never had to worry about that. They could cover up other people's errors. They could cover up for each other's errors. And you just don't see that with this team yet. And you just got to find ways to cause more disruption. There was not much disruption from this Pack defense, a unit that we are accustomed to seeing them be able to live in opponents' backfield, shut down the running game. They can't do that right now. And, the solution for fixing that is obviously the coaches know what they need to fix, and they'll get to work, like Doran said after the game, but they don't have much time to, fix those issues. And in terms of just, if you wanted, I feel like, the instinct from the fan base, from what I've seen on Twitter, is to blame the personnel, call for personnel changes. I think if they felt like they had better options at linebacker, we'd be seeing those better options at linebacker, right? So I don't know, man. Is there anything you think they could do, they could change, that we could see, improvement from the defense moving forward? Like, are there any issues that you see that are clearly fixable? It's obviously above our pay grade, but just anything you can see out there based on the first 4 games.
Yeah, tackling's been a problem. We talk about it a lot in this podcast, and it's hard to change. That's just a fundamental part of the game of football. Blocking and tackling are the 2 biggest keys in the sport, and it hasn't gone too well against big time games. The only change you could really do, I guess, in that situation is cycle in other players. If one player's not executing, try somebody else. We haven't really seen that too much on the defense yet with Kamal Bonner or Jalen Parker or anyone like that quite yet. Will they try that this week? I don't know. I wouldn't be opposed. I'm not saying that they need to, but when things aren't going right, something has to change at some point, because, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is the definition, of insanity. So we'll see what happens. But I think that's the only really thing you can change right now. It's the middle of the year. It's not like they can go back and teach these guys how to tackle at a high clip. It's kind of what they were supposed to, what the whole month of August and the whole month of March was for. So we'll see what happens. But I think that's the only thing you can really change at this point. It's just new personnel and see what happens. Not saying they should or shouldn't, but at some point, you got to try to find a spark. They worked on offense with CJ Bailey. Do you look for a spark on defense? Maybe.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where that spark will come from at the moment. We'll see. I think originally you looked at the schedule and you saw Northern Illinois on the schedule after Clemson. And even if they lost again to the Tigers, you can merely say, all right, well, they'll have kind of a bounce back game against the Huskies. Like you said, the Huskies have beaten Notre Dame this season. They're capable of beating a good Power 5 team. That's going to be a battle. So we'll see how that turns out for the Pack. But just a few short days to get everything turned around, and we'll see what the Wolfpack looks like next week. But yeah, it's there's a long way to go before you're even at, I'd say, close to the standard of what Tony Gibson's defenses have played at over the previous few seasons. All right. Usually at this point in the show, we like to give out a couple of game balls. Dave Doran said it himself after the game that there really aren't any individual performances to really point to and praise. I think we can still hand out a couple of game balls, Noah. Why don't you give me your first one? Just your player of the game that you'd like to recognize as a bright spot in an otherwise discouraging loss.
Yeah, I go with Brandon Cisse, a guy that left last week's game early with an injury. Looked kind of serious at the moment. He was down for a while, helped off the field. He came back. He played against Clemson. He was targeted 8 times, most of any NC State defensive back. Only gave up 3 receptions. One was a 40-yarder, but he did make a play on the play before. Same exact thing, pass breakup. He had 2 pass breaks from the game, led the team in that category. So I think Brandon Cisse and his ability to bounce back can play pretty well against a team that has Cade Klubnik, who can pass the ball at high clip. So give it to Brandon Cisse.
Agreed. I thought he played well in the first few games or first couple games, obviously, before leaving Louisiana Tech with an injury. But yeah, I thought he looked good. Even on that deep completion, I thought he still had pretty good coverage. It was a great throw by Klubnik. Yeah, the hype around him has certainly been legit. He's looked good. Like I said, we're going to publish PFF grades. Ignore his PFF grade. I think it's an unfair grade to him based on what we actually saw on the field. So I thought he had a good day. I'm going to recognize another sophomore. I'll go with Kendrick Raphael. 10 carries for 94 yards, mostly in the second half, but a career high. Found the end zone again, so congrats to him. He's led the team in rushing each of the past couple weeks. Maybe we could see him take on more and more of a role in the backfield. He was NC State's most consistent running back last year, so maybe that'll continue into this season as well. And yeah, he gets the game ball. I think we would both collectively give one to CJ. I mean, you put together a very solid performance in your first career start in Death Valley. I think he deserves some recognition. And now it's just all about looking forward from here, Noah. Where does the Pack go from here? You look at this team, and I found myself, going back to the 2019 season, and you look at that Clemson box score, and you look at the season stats. Devin Leary was the quarterback. Zonovan Knight was a running back. Tanner Ingle and Peyton Wilson led the team in tackles that year. The players were there. It just hadn't come together yet. And then you watch this game, and you see CJ Bailey. You obviously have KC. You have 2 young running backs and Kendrick and Hollywood Smothers scoring touchdowns. You have young receivers like Keenan Jackson and Terrell Anderson, Noah Rogers, of course, making plays. And you're like, all right, is this a situation where we were a year too early on the Wolfpack? Is this not necessarily going to be a 2019 year where things got ugly for NC State, but is this – it certainly doesn't look like it's going to be the leap year for the Pack as a program. Is this a year where they're kind of building for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, in a way, I referenced it earlier, but building for the future is not a bad thing. I do think they can build for the future and win 8 to 9 games.
I agree.
Possibility. But I definitely think looking forward to the future is gonna creep into some of the coaching staff's head throughout the year. And I think that it would be imperative to do that just because of how young this team is on offense, especially. Defense is more veteran laden, but the offense is most of those key players come back, the skill guys. The offensive line will look different next year, but I think overall, building for the future while winning is the best recipe. You'd rather build for the future and win 7-8 games than build for the future and go 4-8, which both could happen this year. I'm not going to put it out of the realm of possibility. If they don't fix things, wins aren't going to come. I mean, The teams they're playing aren't top 15 teams, but they're also not pushovers. I mean, they have to go to Cal, who has played well to start the year. They did lose at Florida State. They're hosting Northern Illinois. They've got, some teams that they're having the schedule. Carolina was always a game at the end of the year. So, I mean, there's games on the schedule that, yes, are winnable, but if you don't play well, they could get ugly pretty quick.
No, absolutely. And, to be clear, I don't think NC State's going to go 4-8 this season. But if if the defense doesn't take steps forward, if the offense, can't help them out with the rushing attack and cut out the turnovers and play better complementary football, this could be a 500 team. It could be, a 7-5 type of team. I don't think it's going to end up being that. I think the schedule, it still works out favorably, even after you start 2-2. Like they're at home for a while now, and they're playing teams that they should be able to beat if they come in and take steps forward. But there needs to be steps forward. Like we're pointing out that like these goals are still attainable of a solid, 8-win season, 9-win season maybe. But like the improvements have to happen, and they have to happen fast. So we'll see how this just continues to develop for the Pack, and we'll see what type of changes we see against Northern Illinois, because that's just seemed to be the prevailing attitude in the post-game press conference. Was like no one's panicking. They're 4 games into the year, 2/3 of the season left, but I think there is a prevailing sentiment that things do need to change, and it's all about how the Pack responds to that change. The past couple years, they responded well to change. We'll see if they can keep that going with a new group of players and the newest iteration of the Pack, and we'll see how they respond to, once again, having their backs against the wall, Noah. All right, that's all from us today. We appreciate you all tuning in to the Wolfpacker Show and watching today's episode. We will be back later in the week to preview the Pack's home game against Northern Illinois, matchup between Dave Doran and the team he used to coach before joining the Pack. Plenty of exciting content about that on the site this week, so go check out the wolfpacker.com. Noah's going to drop a really exciting feature at some point this week, so really excited for that. And we will all see you later in the week to talk Huskies versus Wolfpack. Thanks again for tuning in.